Welcome to the Treaty One Nation and Winnipeg Art Gallery Past, Present, and Future panel series. I'm your host, Adeline Bird. August 3rd, 2021 marks 150 years of the signing of Treaty One. The Treaty One Nation, along with the T1 DC, TRCM, and Parks Canada will be hosting the 150th Treaty One commemoration. This panel series will be a three-part series focusing on the past, present, and future of Treaty One, where we will ask our Treaty One guests questions and hear their answers. Last week, we had past, so if you haven't checked out that interview, make sure to check out that interview. And today's panel is present. And here we have Chief Dennis Meeches and Chief GlennHudson. And I'll get you to introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Chief GlennHudson of Peguis First Nation. The group actually been involved with Treaty One over the last, I guess it would be better part of 14 years. We had reorganized our coming together of the Treaty One nations, and today we have organization Treaty One Nation and also our Treaty One Development Corporation. And we partnering with our treaty partners, that being Long Plain, Saugeen, Peguis, Roseau River, Sandy Bay, Swan Lake, and Broken Head Nation. So we have banded and come together as Treaty One Nation. And I think that was the original intent of our forefathers, the ones that signed treaty back in 1871. And today we're carrying out the mandate, fulfilling our treaty obligations in the form of our treaty land entitlements and repatriating our lands. And one of our largest initiatives is Nawe Odana at the former Kapiong Barracks site in the city of Winnipeg. And it is a special repatriation for us because not only have we come together on that repatriation of that land, but also we're looking at building out economic development, which would be on the order of $1.5 to $2 billion build out over probably 10 years. And obviously we're partnering with the federal government and the city of Winnipeg on this initiative, and the province of Manitoba is a signatory of the treaty land entitlement also. So that's one of the main areas, the main focus as far as our organization and our developments going forward. I'll turn it over to Chief Meeches.
Yeah, my name is Dennis Meeches. I'm the Chief of Long Plain, also the Treaty One spokesperson. Been a public servant for 26 years, very long time. And grew up on Long Plain First Nation. And throughout the years, it's been a real challenge, but to understand, what has happened to our people since the signing of treaties. And we'll discuss a bit more about that in the questions that you have for us. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chief Meeches and Chief Hudson. So I guess my first question is for Chief Hudson. Can you describe what Treaty One means to our communities and how has it played a role in our present day relationship with the Crown?
71. Look at peace and harmony with society. I believe it was never to cede and surrender our lands, but obviously we were placed on reservation. And today, we are looking at repatriating our lands and working together with our partners, that being the federal government, and in some cases, specific cities and municipalities in terms of our going forward. And one of the main focuses of that repatriation has been economic development. And I know we have a lot of people that are in need of housing in terms of building up our housing portfolios so people do have places to live. But the fact of the matter is the treaty number one 80% of it is agricultural based also in terms of the content of the treaty. I know we have done studies over time, and certainly that is one of our focuses at PEGWIS, is to carry out the mandate of the agricultural component, where we have probably on the order of 50% of our lands. That's something that we continue to work toward. I know having sustainability is important as part of that overall approach. And I do want to say one thing though, we have signed treaties encompassing our lands, but water is very important to us as First Nations also. And I think, reflecting those treaties, it is our responsibility to protect the lands, protect the waters, and certainly to protect our environment. That's the reason why we speak to the order of taking care of Mother Earth. And that's something that is reflected in those treaties.
Thank you. Chief Meeches, looking at where we are today, what do you think we need to work on to ensure the treaties are fulfilled as intended in 1871?
Thank you for that question, Adeline. Well, there's so much to do. A lot of work for our First Nation, Treaty One Nation. The past 150 years have not been too kind to all of us. As a treaty partner, I think Canada has neglected to honor the treaty. So we can point to practically every file: land claims, health, education, economic reconciliation. So there's, so with the social policies and legislation that have been imposed on us, that has really created a dysfunction in a lot of our First Nation communities. So the colonial system that was imposed upon us has done so much damage to our social fabric as Indigenous people, losing identity. I think there's a lot of work to do to repatriate our customs, our traditions, our languages. So I hope the next 150 years will be kind or a lot better, as treaty partners. And I'm hoping that, this year being the year that it was, that Canada will truly wake up and understand the damage that residential schools have done, and then the social policies such as child welfare. Since the creation of First Nation, the reserve system, it's a feudal system of government that's been imposed on us. And so Treaty One Nation, through the vision of our forefathers, our grandfathers, grandmothers, I really believe that they would love to see us bind ourselves, such as what we're beginning to do with Treaty One Nation. And there's a really good book that was written many years ago called Our Tomorrows, and I would recommend people read that book, and also the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report and their findings, so people can have a better understanding of that. Right now, there's a big disconnect, and unfortunately, politicians sometimes have created division, such as what we're witnessing here in the province of Manitoba currently. So a lot of work to do, but at the same time, there's a lot of optimism and a lot of, for Indigenous people to just continue pushing hard on repatriating our languages, our customs, our traditions, our heritage. And so I'm very, very hopeful that GlennHudson will bring a lot of prosperity and reconciliation. There's a real golden opportunity here for Winnipeg, the province, and the federal government, the provincial governments, civic governments, to really work in partnership with the Treaty One Nation in developing GlennHudson. I think that that location, and it's kind of in some ways destiny. It brought the Treaty 1 Nation together, and I'm hoping that it will also bring our Treaty 1 Nation government a stronger partnership and in working with the different levels of government.
Share with us
Okay.
some of the oral teachings you received from family members and knowledge keepers. We'll start with you, Chief Hudson.
It is to protect Mother Earth. Obviously, it is to protect our waters. I think with where we are today, obviously we were one of the first First Nations in Canada to undertake local control of education back in 1974. I think that's something that our ancestors and our knowledge keepers, as far as our language and our culture, we need to preserve those and need to strengthen those in our curriculums today in terms of our education, even in our child and family, our health, and the different areas, even justice. When it comes down to it, I think there's an opportunity today to strengthen that. And I think when it comes down to the language speaks of our position as First Nations and Anishinaabe in terms of how we deal with the land, and those are covered in our oral traditions. When it comes down to our culture, we have to get back to the ways of our people. And I know I mentioned about our treaties, and it's written right in the Constitution of Canada, our hunting, fishing, and trapping, when it comes down to our practices. And that's our culture going back. That's the ways of our people. And it was to protect and preserve those ways. And obviously today, to blend them in to those various departments, now the Arctic and have control of that and strengthen that. So that's something that I was taught, and I just want to share a story with you on the hunting side. When I shot my first moose, my grandfather used to hunt in this specific area, and he guided me where to go in terms of direct and come with me. I went with another individual from our community, and he says, go to this point on the south side at this particular time of day. You'll see moose there. There'll be moose bedded down in and amongst the willows, and they'll be sunning on a very sunny day, cold winter day when we went out on snowmobiles. You'll see those moose sunning there. And sure enough, when we drove down there, about an hour and a half drive on snowmobile, there was 2 moose sunning there that day. So, they have a rich history of our land, a rich history of the animals, and certainly a rich history of harvesting the animals, in this case, moose. And we were lucky enough to get one of the moose. We had a good shot at it, so we were lucky enough to harvest one, and we shared it amongst our people. That's what we continue to do, even through our harvesting of our animals, or any harvest that we bring in, we share amongst the people. And I think that's what's reflective in our treaties also, is that sharing and the ways of our people. So I just wanted to share that story.
Rich, thank you. I always look forward to when we get fish from our rise. Yeah, all the time. I'm like, yes, we're gonna get fish. Just so we get that big girl.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very happy time.
Yep. Chief Meeches, you?
Yeah, thank you. That's I was raised by my grandparents, and so I was in many ways I was very fortunate to be raised by them. My parents had separated at a very young age. When I was very young, I think I was 3 years old when I went to live with my grandparents. we've seen a lot of separations, family separations happen. In the 60s, 70s, 80s, and a lot of that can be attributed to residential schools, child welfare. And some of my siblings were adopted out into child welfare system. As a teenager, I understood Anishinaabe to a degree, to listen. And then I made it, for myself to repatriate the language. And I've come to really be able to, there's still a lot of work to do, but I do speak the Anishinaabe language. I do understand the language. I've also, both my grandparents on my father and mother's side, my grandmothers, they were all singers. They sang traditional music, and so, and they were well known. Old Grass Dance Society songs, for example. So at the time of there's legislation that banned ceremonies, and I know 1951 the law was changed, but during the residential school era, many of the Northern Plains indigenous people had grass dance societies, and Long Plain was one of those communities. So our grandfathers, grandmothers, they had kept the languages, the songs and the dances, the ceremonies alive too. That was their mission, to keep that alive. So I was lucky to be able to, to travel powwows at a young age in the 70s, late 60s, 70s, 80s with my grandparents. And my grandfather would take his drumstick with him and he'd go sing with different drum groups throughout Turtle Island. But I grew up on the powwow trail, so I was one of those lucky ones that was able to dance, at a young age, 4 years old, and still dancing today, and I'll be dancing for the rest of my life. And to me, I think that was so important. I recall when I was a child, being the only child, in Long Plain that was dancing. Now, with my grandchildren, my children, they're all, they're very much all involved in the dancing and the culture. And so there's a slow repatriation of all of, and the powwows have done a great job in preserving the culture and, the song and dance. And a good example is even walking through this pandemic we're currently doing. My grandparents were about 8, 9 years old when the Spanish flu hit. And I remind my grandchildren who, that their great-grandparents had walked through this pandemic. So, and that helped our people. Social media has played a big role in that. So I think, the traditions, customs, being able to grow up in that environment, and even though my grandparents raised, I think, 8 of us grandchildren, I was one of the lucky ones to be able to travel to these powwows and learn a lot about who we are as Anishinaabe Dakota people at Long Plain. So I think there's more work to be done. Land repatriation is a big objective for all of our First Nation communities, because we can see what's happened right across the country. There was an actual pattern of after the treaties were signed, then the colonial governments began taking away our lands through illegal surrenders. So a lot of this stuff is it's ongoing, and it's a rebuild of our social fabric because it was torn apart by legislation and policies. But I think my grandfather, I recall him saying to me as a child, "Hey, Nushans, there's 2 things you need to when you become a young man: education and culture. If you have those 2, those will ground you, and they should be able to help you as you walk through your journey in life." So I think the teachings, for me, been fortunate, although I should have paid more attention to the Anishinaabe language growing up as a child, because I heard it on the daily. But, education, okay, I wanted to put a lot of my energy into all of that. And So yeah, the teachings, the sweat lodges, the sun dances, the pipe ceremonies, name-giving ceremonies, all of those. I've been one of the lucky few in Long Plain, and there's a number of us that are able to get that direct teachings from I was living with my grandparents, and I think they understood what was happening around them with the residential school and children's aid, and the challenges, the poverty, and how Canada failed in its obligation to uphold the treaty. So there's so much work to do. But with saying all of that, I think the next 150 years are, I'm an eternal optimist, so I'm hoping everything will get better. Standard of living, repatriation of land, languages, the strengthening of our identity as Anishinaabe, Dakota people, Cree people, Dene, Oji Cree, Métis people. So there's a lot of work to do, and I'm looking forward to that task ahead for all of us. Miigwech.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot of work, but there's something exciting about it, and something rejuvenating about what I love that you talked about social media, because I feel like in the last 2 years, what I've seen on social media has been just incredible. Like unapologetic. People are unapologetic now. People are, raising their voices and taking a stand, and it's so inspiring to watch. So inspiring to watch. Congratulations for sharing it. For both of you, what was memorable for you when hearing about treaties, in particular Treaty 1?
Me, 50 years ago, I was at Lower Fort Garry, a major celebration, 100th anniversary of the signing of Treaty 1. And, as a child attending that powwow at the Fort Garry, got an opportunity to meet, a hero, the late Sergeant Tommy Prince. So to me, that is, it was always, it seems like it was just the other day. And some memories you hold dearly, and you can recall. And then there's some things you don't. I don't even remember going to day school, what happened. So to me, that really, it's a beautiful memory. And here we are 50 years later, about to celebrate the 150. And knowing what we know now, and everything that's happened with the government, and I think that to me is very, very important and the acknowledgement of those treaties. And we always get questioned, well, I have an uncle that attended residential school and almost died at the Portage Residential School. He had pneumonia, and they actually put him outside on the grate, and his friend went and joined him that night to be with him, and had a blanket. They expected him to die. He made it through the night, and then he goes on to lead a very, very good life, working with CP Rail, I believe it was, or CN, and then he went on to join the military too, served in peacetime. So our people are quite resilient and forgiving, and there's countless of stories that our people have been basically beaten down, but they've basically have risen up, and yet they still are loyal to the country and through the treaty. So when you think about it, you go to powwows and you see the flags of Canada, United States, and the Eagle Staffs coming in. Our veterans, they've enlisted in the greatest numbers of any ethnic group in Canada to fight to defend the treaty. And that's the thing. So people ask, okay, why are you, Canada has mistreated us. Why are we supporting Canada? Well, the veterans say, well, we're fighting to defend that treaty we signed. it's so important. If Canada falls, then the treaties fall. So that's, to me, is a good story, a good teaching from veterans that have gone on now, that they fought for Canada, they defended Canada, and now, and Canada hasn't always been kind to even the veterans. When they came home, they were mistreated. They weren't, part of the Canada Settlement Board. I mean, veterans that came home from the war, excluding Indigenous people, were given, land allotments, right? So, and the ones that came home to the reserves, say Long Plain, they were given land in Long Plain, which, reserve land we already owned. So even that's a claim in itself. Eventually would need to be resolved. So there's a lot of work to do. But the 100th anniversary is still etched in my mind. I know it'll be a bit more challenging this year with the 150, and that we're still in the pandemic, but it'll still be a moment for us to pause and reflect on what's happened, and to celebrate that we're still here. We have a 150th anniversary, and that's why we Treaty One Nation government, the Treaty One Nation Governing Council. Why did we choose that name, Treaty One Nation? Well, it's a reminder to Canada also too. If you drive through Treaty One territory, you see the big billboards, Treaty One ancestral homelands. So there's a lot of work to do, lots of work to repatriate, reconciliate, with Canada. And I'm thinking Canadians in general are more supportive now, and hopefully they'll continue on that, because we've always said that, Chief Hudson, a strong Treaty One Nation makes a stronger country here in Canada, and no more divide and conquer. We still have even that divide and conquer. We still have those challenges with the feudal system of government that has been imposed on us by through the Indian Act. And anyway, thank you very much, Adeline.
Myself, the treaties and Treaty Number 1, it reaffirms, our rights as far as our traditions in terms of hunting, fishing, and trapping. I know, going back as far as knowing that history, and certainly going forward, I guess maybe I'll speak a little more on that, because we have organized in a way that we come together once again as Treaty One nations. There were 7 First Nations that signed Treaty Number 1, and it's to reaffirm, our nation-to-nation relationship in terms of working with the federal government, our treaty partner, and that treaty relationship needs to be based on mutual respect and mutual recognition of our rights. And I think that's something that we hold a shared responsibility in terms of protecting those rights as treaty people, but also working with the federal government in terms of taking on their responsibility. And today, given where we are in this time frame, as far as residential schools and what has been uncovered to date to Canadian society, we need to get back in negotiating and implementing our processes of treaties, that being land claims and other constructive agreements. I know today we're negotiating our CFS, child and family legislation, and it's so important for that, because I don't think we've ever given up responsibility and jurisdiction of our children. It's the fact they were just taken away, and the implementation on the doctrine of discovery was utilized there in terms of trying to eradicate our people, and obviously we're seeing that today in the unmarked graves, and we have to get back in working together and to make sure that those things are corrected, that history is corrected, because it was a one-sided history in terms of implementation of our treaties. There is no doctrine of discovery in Turtle Island. We were here first. We will always be here going forward. And I think that's what those treaties represent as our forefathers in working together, having that mutual respect and mutual recognition, but also that shared responsibility of Turtle Island. And, one of the things I'll state as part of this overall process is we need to call on the federal government, provincial government, territorial governments, and even municipal governments in terms of repudiating the concepts used to justify European sovereignty. That was never a part of our treaties. It was, again, to have that mutual recognition and respect for one another, and to look at taking on that responsibility, that shared responsibility going forward in making Canada a better Canada. And I think that's embodied in our treaties. And that's what our forefathers had signed way back when, to ensure that. It was never to be conquered or, again, the doctrine of discovery. It was to work together in peace and harmony. That's the understanding. And, when I share that story of the moose in sharing our take, that's what it was all about, And I think Canada has to look at getting back to that table and getting it right, and working along with the provinces and the territorial governments, the municipal governments. So to me, that's what treaty represents.
What would you like young people to know and take away from our storytelling of the treaties? We'll start with you, Chief Meeches.
Well, I thank you again. And there's so much with the treaties, to pass that treaty knowledge to our young people. But you know what? I'm really inspired by our young Indigenous people right across this country. There's so much. You could see all the good work they're doing. They're really, my grandmother, when we get up in the mornings to go to school, we would hear it every morning. Onishkan, Onishkan. So get up. And that's, in our language, Onishkan, get up. So I mean, in some ways, it's, to me, we are reawakening. And our young people are a real driving force behind the change. And I see, a lot of great opportunities for that to happen. Our young people are searching out and looking for answers. And they're repatriating their language, the cultures. There's one young man from Peguis, Weston Sutherland, very, very inspiring young role model who is repatriating the language. So I think there's a lot of great work happening among our young Indigenous people, including yourself, Adeline, being who you are and what, the work that you're doing. So we're seeing great examples of that right across the board. But for me, I'm very fortunate. My grandchildren are able to live and know to grow up on the power trail. Basically, my children are very proud of them. Most of them are educators, teachers, and they very, very well known seamstresses, beaters. So I think right across the board, there's a revival of Indigenous, knowledge, and we're always worried. Okay, what's the next generation? How are they going to? It seems like we're losing culture, languages, but I think the opposite may be happening now, and I think we're moving in the right direction. Again, social media is a big driver of that. Social media can be good. I know it's difficult when you're Indigenous leaders, because that's also in some ways a challenge for us dealing with social media in our First Nation communities. So yeah, we got to find balance in that, body, mind, spirit, and be peace with to find peace and harmony in what we do. After all, these treaties were peace and friendship treaty that were signed in 1871. And in the case of Long Plain, Swan Lake, and Sandy Bay, there was an adhesion treaty, June 20th, 1876. So I think, more and more we're moving our people in the direction as basically, again, I want to refer back to Wobbling Our Tomorrows, book written by our knowledge keepers many, many years ago. And we've got to find those guideposts as we walk through the medicine wheel of life and find the sage keepers. There's a lot of sages out there that are helping out and redirecting our people to the good way. Chibimadzi Tanishinaba, Chibimadzi, to live a good life. So a lot of that is, I think, for me, again, I'm an eternal optimist. I know we've struggled, we've had challenges, growing up in our First Nation communities, but the promise of tomorrow, I'm very, very hopeful as I can see it, and I'm a witness to it, the energy that our young people bring, and I think it bodes well for us as we move forward.
As far as the storytelling goes of the treaties, we do have a blended approach as far as our elders participating in our education system. And when children are disciplined, when they are corrected, I guess, as far as their actions in the school, rather than requiring them to go home if they've done something wrong, and we have them sit with our elders. And today, that has done wonders in terms of the discipline in our school system. But obviously there are stories that are told there and teachings that are passed on to our young people in terms of those stories go. And the traditions, I agree with Chief Meeches. Our young people are rising up. They're changing and engaging as far as participating in our traditional and cultural activities. I was just in a gathering yesterday where we're reflecting on our young people going out hunting elk. And the first time I've seen that in our community, obviously we've walked many miles in terms of out in pursuit of elk, because they're very wily animals, so you have to be very quiet. But we had our two of our hunters, our young hunters, going on bicycles and carrying their guns on their backs to be able to go through a larger territory, I guess, because the elk do move quite fast and quite rapidly. So they're finding creative ways as far as those stories go, and building on that when it comes down to practicing the ways of our people, in this case hunting and living off the land, and continuing to do that. And with our young people today, they are much more educated because we're introducing education in our own communities today. We've taken that responsibility, so children do come home and they are well looked after in our communities, and they're embracing those traditions and carrying out ways of creativity. So they're starting to embark on creating their own stories in terms of practicing our treaty rights, and that being our hunting, fishing, and gathering. Even this year, this past year, I come to realize my family. I grew up in a family of fishers. My uncles were fishermen throughout their history, many of them, and my mothers and my aunts and cousins were filleters, professional filleters, So I grew up in a fishing family, and we have a lot of stories, that we have shared, being on the water, but also doing it right. I know our grandmother and grandfather, they were Cree on the one side, and they always say "Mama sis, Mama sis." That means don't do it anyway. You got to do it right when it comes down to doing things. So just those simple stories, and corrections helped us in terms of carrying on. But our young people are very creative today, and they're engaging, and especially with this residential school outcomes, they're understanding that history, and they're embodied more in our cultural practices now, like our powwows, the sun dances, the different types of ceremonies. There's nothing but young people participating in those today. And that's a very, very good thing for us, and a bright future ahead for us.
Rich, thank you. So my last question, again, is for the both of you. Where can people get more information on Treaty 1?
Thank you for that question. We have so many knowledge keepers out there, our elders. They can, I think, to seek out their wisdom and their guidance. And I think there's a lot in academia. There's a lot of, I think, good information within the treaties. But I think more so that needs to be over time. I think with Indigenous governments, the implementation of Indigenous curriculum more so in the learning, because I think that's been one of the failings of the education system, generally speaking, right across the board. I've said it time and time again. It's unfortunate. Canadians in general really don't understand Indigenous history, and we need to bring that education and awareness to them. So at the same token, we also need to push that hard and bring it into our curriculums. And I think we're seeing evidence of that happening now. We're getting more information and education incorporated into the Indigenous curriculum. So we'll see that happen more and more, and it's more, it's much needed. And again, Treaty 1 itself, the Treaty 1 Nation Governing Council, our mandate is to promote the treaty history. We're actually working. We have WAG-Qaumajuq, and it'll be, I think, a great learning center. It's so unique, but we're also negotiating with Parks Canada on the idea of advancing a Treaty 1 interpretive center right at Lower Fort Garry National Historic Site. And there's a big need for that, and I think we'll see more and more of that happening. For example, Long Plain, the National Historic site that we have at the Portage Residential School, that's also a learning experience that will reflect on treaty history too. So more and more, I think people, again, there's a lot of work being done, and in the same token, I think social media has a big role to play, although sometimes there are challenges with that, but the filtering of information and accurate information. But I think we're on the right path, and more and more we'll see evidence of that. Just the idea of having Treaty 1 billboards out, ancestral homelands. So people see this, and it's and they'll reflect on it. And so I think there will be a lot of opportunities to look at that and to be able to understand more of our treaty history as an Anishinaabe people. So yeah, I think there will be a lot of resources out there, just and including film, such as yourself, Adnan. The promotion of that, even this segment we're doing today, is a good opportunity to relay our message about a Treaty 1 nation and Treaty 1 itself.
Just wanted to add that, come to mind that our schools and libraries that we have in our First Nations has many books in terms of treaties, specifically Treaty Number 1. I know within our library, we carry the negotiations of TLE surrounding not only Peguis, but Treaty Number 1 as far as what is owed to us and the reasons why that is. And when it comes down to the illegal surrender of our former St. Peter's Reserve, which was encompassed the city of Selkirk and north to Lake Winnipeg, there's a video in terms of the negotiations that went on and information shared there. But also, I know our former Chief Eddie Thompson had wrote a book, Chief Peguis and His Descendants, and it reflects the importance of treaties, obviously reflecting on Treaty 1, which we were a part of at the time, but also Wabung. Wabung is a very, very important document and book in terms of our treaties and the responsibilities there, and obviously going forward. But if you wanted to look at contemporary, we do have the Museum of Man and Nature. Actually, they have a Treaty 1 medal there and an explanation on some of the surroundings of the medal and the contents within Treaty 1. But I think Lower Fort Garry would be definitely a place in terms of getting the information on the treaty, because that's where the Treaty Number 1 was signed, at that fort. But going forward, I know with the Treaty 1 organization, we do have a website also, and they can get information there. But our plans are to build a cultural center also. Chief Meeches had referred to it at Lower Fort Garry, but also at Nawe Udana, because that's the center of the heart for our people in terms of our repatriation and what it is and what it means to us in working with the city of Winnipeg, the province of Manitoba, and Canada in terms of that build out and what that represents for us going forward. So many, many, many good things and many information there, but many good things to come.
Both for being here with us today. Thank you for your time, Chief Meeches and Chief Hudson. For up-to-date information, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and check out our website for a list of events. Thank you all so much for watching.